The Nexus Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian, its crystalline walls reaching toward a domed ceiling that displayed the swirling galaxies beyond. Here, in the heart of the Galactic Confederation, representatives from 47 star systems gathered to discuss the most pressing matter of their age: the humans. Admiral Zoidar Tara of the Veltar Empire adjusted her ceremonial battle plates, the bioluminescent scarring across her chitinous face pulsing with barely contained irritation. Around the circular amphitheater, other delegates shifted in their respective environmental pods. Some breathing methane, others suspended in crystalline liquid, a few existing as pure energy constructs within containment fields. The humans, she began, her voice resonating through universal translators, continue to embarrass themselves with their primitive vessels. A ripple of what passed for laughter among the diverse species echoed through the chamber. On the central holographic display, images of human ships rotated slowly, blocky, angular constructions that looked more like flying debris than military craft, where Veltaran vessels curved like living art, incorporating millennia of aerodynamic perfection and quantum fold technology. Human ships appeared to have been assembled in salvage yards. High Arbiter Kilmoth, a being of crystallized thought patterns whose existence predated most civilizations in the room, projected his words directly into their minds. These creatures emerged from their gravity well barely 3 standard cycles ago. Their metallurgy remains crude, their energy systems quaint, and yet, interjected a new voice, they refuse to accept our guidance. The chamber fell silent. Ambassador Nixarian of the hegemony floated within her suspension field, her translucent form pulsing with colors that conveyed emotions untranslatable to most species. The hegemony had been the first to make contact with humanity, expecting the usual submission and gratitude that primitive species showed when welcomed into galactic civilization. Instead, the humans had politely declined membership. Refused? Admiral Zyther's mandibles clicked with amusement. On what grounds? They claimed, Nixarian's colors shifted to what might have been embarrassment, that they preferred to develop their technology independently. Something about maintaining their sovereignty. The concept of a primitive species, maintaining sovereignty in the face of obviously superior civilizations, was so absurd that several delegates required medical assistance to prevent their equivalent of laughter-induced cardiac events. High Arbiter Kilmoth's thoughts grew cold. Perhaps they require a demonstration of the natural order. 3 sectors away, Captain David Korath stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching stars wheel past the main viewport. The ship's interior was indeed crude by galactic standards: exposed conduits, mechanical switches instead of thought interfaces, and gravity generated by simple rotation rather than elegant field manipulation. But there was something else the aliens couldn't see from their sensor readings: the profound concentration on every human face, the way each crew member's eyes held a weight that spoke of species-defining choices made in the darkness between stars. "Sir," called out Navigation Officer Catherine Blake, her voice carrying the crisp efficiency that had become humanity's trademark in space. "We're receiving a transmission from Earth Command. Priority Alpha." The main screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral James Harrison's weathered features. Behind him, through the windows of Lunar Station Alpha, Earth hung like a blue marble against the black, beautiful, fragile, and utterly alone in a galaxy that had just discovered it existed. "David," the Admiral's voice carried strain that 3 years of first contact hadn't erased. "The Confederation has issued what they're calling an invitation to demonstrate our defensive capabilities. They're sending a Veltaran battle group to our position." Captain Korath felt his jaw tighten. How many ships? 12 heavy cruisers, 6 dreadnoughts, and 1 of their Fortress-class vessels. They call it the Kethnol. The Admiral paused, and in that silence lay the weight of every choice humanity had made since achieving faster-than-light travel. "They want to show us how primitive we are, David. They want us to submit." Through the viewport, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of biological species. But Captain Korath had learned something during humanity's brief journey into the galaxy. The universe might not care about individual species, but it respected strength. "When do they arrive?" 18 hours. The bridge fell silent except for the subtle hum of recycled air and the distant thrum of the ship's fusion core. Each human on the bridge understood what those 18 hours represented, possibly the last period of human independence in galactic history. "Sir," Chief Engineer Rodriguez spoke up from his station, his fingers dancing across control surfaces that looked primitive but responded with precision that would have surprised alien observers. "All systems are nominal. The modifications we've been working on, they're ready." Captain Korath nodded slowly. "The modifications." 3 years of work based on principles that the Confederation had dismissed as impossible, not because the physics was wrong, but because no species had ever been desperate enough to attempt them. "Admiral," he said to the screen, "transmit our response to the Confederation. Tell them we accept their invitation." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew alone with the weight of decision. In the silence that followed, Catherine Blake spoke the words everyone was thinking. "They have no idea what we've become, do they?" Captain Korath turned back to the viewport, where distant stars held the promise of 1,000 alien civilizations, each convinced of their superiority over the young species from Sol 3. "No," he said quietly. "They don't." The Velteran battle group translated out of hyperspace with a precision that spoke of millennium-old naval traditions. 18 warships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with energy fields that could deflect asteroids, their weapons arrays capable of glassing planets. Admiral Zathatura stood on the command deck of the Kithanal, a vessel so massive it possessed its own gravitational field. Around her, the finest warriors of the Velaturan Empire attended to their duties with the casual efficiency of beings born to rule the void. "Sensors detect the human vessel," reported Tactical Coordinator Jacksamiel, his bioluminescent patches flickering with data downloads. "Single ship. Approximately 200 meters in length. Primitive fusion drive. No detectable energy shielding." Admiral Zathara's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. The humans had brought one ship to face 18. Either they were incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. "Open a communication channel." The main screen activated, revealing the bridge of the human vessel. Admiral Zatara had studied human physiology during the journey. Bipedal mammals with soft skin and no natural armor evolved from creatures that hunted in packs on their gravity-cursed world. The human commanding officer appeared calm, his eyes holding a steadiness that Admiral Zoidara found mildly interesting. Most primitive species showed terror when confronted with Velteran's superiority. "I am Admiral Zaitatura of the Veltaran Imperial Navy," she announced. "You will surrender your vessel and prepare to be escorted to Confederation space for processing." The human captain, their records indicated his name was Korath, tilted his head slightly. "And if we decline, then we will demonstrate why decline is not an option." Captain Korath was quiet for a long moment, and Admiral Zaithara found herself studying his expression. There was something there she couldn't quite identify. Not fear, not anger, but something else. Something that reminded her, strangely, of her own reflection before major battles. "Admiral," the human said, finally, "you should know that we've spent the last 3 years studying your technology, learning from your example. We've made some improvements to our ships." Admiral Zaithara's amusement deepened. "Improvements?" "Your vessel appears to be held together with metallic bindings and chemical propulsion." "Appearances," Captain Korath said with what might have been a smile, "can be deceiving." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Zaithatura staring at a blank screen. Around her the bridge crew maintained their positions, but she noticed several sets of eyes turning toward her for guidance. "Tactical," she commanded. "Charge primary weapons. Target their propulsion systems. We'll disable them and bring them aboard for examination." Admiral Sensor Coordinator Velris spoke up, her voice carrying an odd harmonic. "I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the human vessel." "Define unusual." "The power signature is shifting, as if their entire ship is reconfiguring itself." Admiral Zaithatara's primary eyes focused on the tactical display. The human ship remained visually unchanged, but the energy readings were indeed fluctuating in patterns she'd never seen before. Could be a primitive attempt at stealth technology, she decided. Proceed with the attack. The Cathanal's primary batteries charged with the sound of contained stars, energy that could crack moons building in crystalline matrices throughout the massive ship. Around the battle group, 17 other vessels prepared to demonstrate to these upstart mammals why submission was not merely recommended. It was inevitable. But in the space between the two forces, something impossible was happening. The human ship's energy signature wasn't just changing, it was multiplying. "All stations report ready, Captain." Captain Korath nodded, his hands steady on the command chair's armrests, despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Around him, his crew worked with the focused calm that had carried humanity through 3 years of secret preparation. "Chief Rodriguez, status on the Morrison Field generators." "All 6 generators operating at optimal parameters, sir. Field coherence holding steady at 97%. The Morrison Field, named after the physicist who had first theorized its existence, then died in the testing accident that proved it was possible. The alien civilizations had dismissed it as impossible not because of the physics, but because no species had ever willingly risked the kind of exotic matter reactions required to generate it. No species except humanity. "Navigation, confirm coordinates for field deployment." "Coordinates locked, Captain." All 6 deployment points marked and verified. Captain Korath took a breath. In the next few minutes they would either validate 3 years of dangerous research and desperate gambles, or they would cease to exist in a brief flash of exotic matter annihilation. "Communications, transmit final message to Earth Command. Full tactical log, all research data," and he paused, thinking of his daughter back on Luna, probably asleep in her dormitory at the academy. "Tell them we tried." "Message away, sir." On the tactical display, the Velteran battle group hung in space like a constellation of barely contained violence. 18 ships that represented the accumulated military might of a species that had conquered half their galaxy, now focused on one human vessel that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. "Sir," sensor operator Thompson called out, his voice tight with concentration. "They're charging weapons. Primary batteries on all ships. They're not holding back." Captain Korath smiled grimly. "Good. We need them concentrated." The irony wasn't lost on him. The aliens' overwhelming superiority was exactly what made the Morrison Field effective. The more ships in proximity, the more targets for field deployment, the more devastating the cascade effect would be. "Chief Rodriguez, initiate field generation on my mark." "Standing by, sir." Captain Korath watched the tactical display as 18 alien warships prepared to obliterate his single vessel. In a few seconds they would fire, expecting to see the UES Defiance disappear in a cloud of superheated plasma. Instead, they were about to learn what happened when a species raised on a world where everything tried to kill them finally stopped holding back. Mark. Reality twisted. The Morrison Field generators, 6 devices that had taken humanity's best physicists 3 years to build and cost 17 researchers their lives, activated simultaneously. Space itself began to fold along predetermined fracture lines, creating pockets of twisted space-time that existed for microseconds before collapsing back into normal dimension. But in those microseconds, the impossible became routine. The UES Defiance didn't just disappear, it multiplied. 6 identical copies of the human ship materialized in perfect formation around the Velteran battle group, each one a complete quantum duplicate existing in a state of controlled dimensional instability. The aliens' sensors, designed to track objects in normal space-time, suddenly found themselves tracking 7 identical ships where there had been 1, and every duplicate was armed with humanity's other secret project. "All units," Captain Korath transmitted across the quantum links connecting him to his other selves, "weapons free." Admiral Zythora's mandibles clicked once in confusion before the first human torpedoes struck her flagship. The Cathnol's shields flared brilliant white as exotic matter warheads detonated against them in precise sequence. But these weren't the crude explosive devices Admiral Zythora had expected. Each torpedo carried a payload of compressed spacetime that unfolded on impact, creating temporary rifts in local reality. "Damage report," she commanded, her bioluminescent patches flashing urgent yellow. "Shields down 17%. Tactical Coordinator Jashuk Smil reported, his voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. "But Admiral, how are there 7 human ships?" Admiral Zythora stared at the tactical display where 7 identical vessels moved with impossible coordination, each one firing weapons that shouldn't exist. Her strategic mind, honed through centuries of conquest, raced through possibilities, holographic projection, cloaking technology, some form of rapid manufacturing. None of it made sense. All ships. Return fire. Concentrate on the original vessel. But which was the original? The 7 human ships moved in perfect synchronization, their energy signatures identical down to quantum fluctuations. The Velteran targeting systems, designed to lock onto unique ship signatures, cycled frantically between targets. The human response was swift and devastating. Exotic matter torpedoes struck 3 more ships simultaneously, their warheads unfolding into brief tears in space-time that bypassed shields entirely. The cruiser Velthax simply ceased to exist for 0.3 seconds before reality reasserted itself, minus the ship's entire forward section. "This is impossible," Admiral Zai-Tura breathed. On her personal display, tactical analyses scrolled past in desperate streams. The human weapons operated on principles her sensors couldn't properly categorize. Not energy, not matter, but some combination that treated the boundary between dimensions as a suggestion rather than a law. And the ships themselves. "Admiral," Sensor Coordinator Valerie spoke up, her voice tight with something approaching fear. "I'm reading quantum entanglement signatures between the human vessels. They're not just identical, they're the same ship existing in multiple probability states." Admiral Zai-Tura felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental controls. In all her years of conquest, she'd never encountered a species that weaponized theoretical physics. "How many species," she asked quietly, "have ever attempted to create stable quantum duplicates?" "None, Admiral. The exotic matter requirements alone would destabilize most star systems. The risk of cascade failure would destroy everything within several light-years." Admiral Zai-Tura finished. She looked at the tactical display where 7 human ships continued their impossible dance of destruction. They're insane. The human ships moved like a single organism, with multiple bodies, coordinating attacks that came from 7 directions simultaneously. Where Veltaran tactics relied on overwhelming firepower and superior positioning, the humans had simply redefined what positioning meant. 3 more Veltaran cruisers lost containment as exotic matter warheads tore through their hulls, creating localized space-time instabilities that made conventional damage control impossible. Admiral Zai-Tura watched her fleet, the pride of the Veltaran Empire, being systematically dismantled by technology that shouldn't exist. "Admiral, we need to withdraw," urged Fleet Coordinator Hexavow, his command harmonics carrying urgent retreat patterns. "Our weapons can't target them effectively, and their exotic matter weapons are destabilizing our hull integrity." But Admiral Zai-Tura's mind was already working beyond the immediate tactical situation. If the humans possessed this technology, if they could create quantum duplicates and weaponize dimensional instability, then every assumption the Confederation had made about these primitive mammals was catastrophically wrong. "Open a channel to the human command vessel," she ordered. "Which one, Admiral?" Admiral Zai-Tura's mandibles clicked with bitter amusement. "Any of them? All of them?" Captain Koreth felt the quantum link connecting him to his other selves as a constant background harmony. 7 minds sharing tactical data at the speed of thought. Through 6 other sets of eyes he watched the Velturan fleet struggling to adapt to warfare that violated their fundamental assumptions about reality. But the Morrison field was unstable by design. Each duplicate existed in a state of controlled dimensional collapse, and maintaining 7 versions of reality simultaneously required constant recalibration of exotic matter containment systems. "Chief Rodriguez, how long can we maintain field coherence?" "Maybe 10 more minutes before cascade failure, Captain. The exotic matter is starting to bleed through dimensional barriers. 10 minutes to change the course of galactic history." Captain Koreth felt the weight of every choice that had led to this moment. Humanity's rejection of Confederation membership, 3 years of desperate research, 17 scientists who had died testing the limits of physics itself. The communication alert chimed. "Captain Koreth." Admiral Zai-Tura's voice carried harmonics he'd never heard before, something between respect and fear. "We need to talk." Captain Koreth gestured to his communications officer, who opened the channel. The Veltaran Admiral appeared on screen, her chitinous features showing signs of stress that probably weren't visible to most species. "Admiral, he said calmly. "Are you ready to discuss terms?" "What are you?" The question came out as a whisper, barely audible through the translation matrix. Captain Korath considered the question seriously. What were humans? They weren't the strongest species in the galaxy or the smartest, or the most technologically advanced, but they had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day, under a star that bombarded them with radiation, in an environment that demanded adaptation or extinction. We're survivors, Admiral. And we've learned that the difference between survival and extinction is often a willingness to risk everything. The exotic matter reactions you're using, one miscalculation could destabilize this entire star system. Yes. The simple acknowledgement seemed to hit Admiral Zothara like a physical blow. You're gambling with the lives of millions of beings on nearby worlds. The alternative, Captain Korath said quietly, was accepting subjugation. Humans don't accept subjugation well. On the tactical display, the 7 human ships continued their impossible existence, quantum duplicates held in reality by pure force of will and engineering that pushed the boundaries of physics to their breaking point. Around them, what remained of the Velteran battle group maintained a cautious distance, their targeting systems unable to lock onto ships that existed in multiple probability states simultaneously. "What do you want?" Admiral Zytherha asked. "Recognition," Captain Korath replied. "Acknowledgement that humanity has the right to exist as an independent species, and assurance that no other Confederation fleet will be sent to demonstrate the natural order." Admiral Zithatara was quiet for a long moment. Through the quantum link, Captain Korath sensed his other selves maintaining the Morrison field with increasingly difficult calculations as exotic matter decay accelerated. "The Confederation will never accept this," she said finally. 47 civilizations built on the principle of guided development, of primitive species accepting the wisdom of their betters. "You're asking us to abandon the foundation of galactic order," Admiral Captain Korath said. And his voice carried the weight of a species that had climbed from cave-dwelling hunters to star-traveling warriors in a geological eye blink. "We're not asking." High Arbiter Kilmoth existed as patterns of crystallized thought, ancient beyond the comprehension of most biological species. In the Nexus Council chamber, he processed the tactical data streaming from Admiral Zythera's fleet with a cognitive capacity that predated the formation of most stars in local space. The humans had broken physics, not bent it, not found clever applications of known principles. They had reached into the fundamental structure of reality and twisted it into shapes that should have collapsed the moment they were attempted. Impossible, he projected to the assembled delegates, many of whom were still struggling to understand what they were witnessing through the tactical feeds. Ambassador Nick Sirian's form pulsed with colors that had no names in biological languages. "The quantum duplication alone requires exotic matter manipulation beyond our current understanding, but the weaponized spacetime," completed Representative Kolmesh of the Silicon Hegemony, "is crystalline form resonating with harmonic distress. They're using dimensional instability as a delivery system for exotic matter payloads. The cascade could destabilize this entire galactic arm." Kilamath's thoughts turned cold with calculation. The humans weren't just threatening the Velteran fleet, they were demonstrating a willingness to risk galactic-scale destruction for the sake of independence. The philosophical implications were staggering. 47 civilizations had built the Confederation on the principle that advanced species guided primitive ones for the greater good. It was a system that had brought peace to most of the galaxy, ending the resource wars and territorial conflicts that had plagued earlier eras. But it required submission. It required acceptance that some species knew better than others, that technological advancement conveyed moral authority. The humans were rejecting that entire framework. "What do we do?" Ambassador Nix Arian asked, her colors shifting through spectrums that conveyed existential uncertainty. Kilmoth considered the question with the patience of geological time. The humans possessed technology that violated multiple conservation laws and maintained it through exotic matter reactions that could destroy star systems. They had demonstrated this technology against a superior fleet and shown a willingness to risk everything rather than submit. Most troubling of all, they were doing it alone. No alliance with other species, no gradual technological development, no period of guided advancement. They had simply become dangerous. "There are precedents," he projected finally. Species that proved too dangerous for integration, but too powerful for subjugation. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate knew the precedents Kilmoth referenced, the extinct civilizations that had pushed too far, too fast, and been quarantined in their home systems until their dangerous innovations destroyed them. But the humans were already past containment. They had faster-than-light travel, weapons that operated outside conventional physics, and the apparent insanity to use both without regard for consequences. You're suggesting, Representative Kolmesh's harmonics carried crystalline horror, that we offer them full membership, equal status with species that have existed for millions of years? I am suggesting, Kolmoth replied, that we consider what happens if we do not. On the central display, tactical data continued streaming from Admiral Zatura's remaining ships. 12 Velturan vessels reduced to debris, 7 human ships that shouldn't exist, maintaining perfect formation, and somewhere behind them a star system full of humans who had just proven they would rather destabilize local reality than accept guidance. The age of easy assumptions was ending. Captain Korath felt the Morrison field beginning to decay as exotic matter containment approached critical thresholds. Through the quantum link, his other selves reported increasing difficulty maintaining dimensional stability. The impossible was becoming even more impossible with each passing second. Chief Rodriguez, field status. 3 minutes to cascade failure, Captain. Maybe less. 3 minutes to consolidate humanity's position in galactic politics. Captain Korath looked at the tactical display where the remaining Velteran ships held position, their commanders undoubtedly reporting to higher authorities and debating options that no longer included easy victory. Sir, Communications Officer Blake reported, we're receiving a transmission. Not from the Veltaran fleet. From the Nexus Council itself. Captain Korath felt a moment of genuine surprise. The Nexus Council represented the highest authority in known space, a body of ancient civilizations that had guided galactic development for millennia. For them to communicate directly with humanity rather than through intermediaries, put them through. The main screen activated, revealing something that might have been the most alien intelligence Captain Korath had ever encountered. High Arbiter Kilmoth appeared as shifting patterns of crystallized light, his consciousness existing in dimensions that human senses could barely perceive. Captain Korath. The entity's words formed directly in his mind. You have created an interesting situation. High Arbiter, Captain Korath replied, maintaining his composure despite communicating with a being older than human civilization. We seek only the right to exist as equals. Equals. The concept seemed to amuse the ancient intelligence. You threaten to destabilize local space-time rather than accept guidance. Most species consider this evidence of dangerous instability. Most species, Captain Korath replied, haven't spent their entire evolutionary history on a world that tried to kill them daily. True, most species developed on worlds that provided for their needs without constant struggle. Kolmoth's patterns shifted in ways that might have indicated consideration. This has made them cautious in their approach to potentially destructive technologies. Captain Korath sensed the weight behind those words. And humans. Humans appear to view potentially destructive technologies as tools for negotiation. The Morrison field fluctuated, reality hiccuping as exotic matter containment approached the edge of controlled failure. Through the quantum link, Captain Korath felt his other selves struggling to maintain dimensional coherence. High Arbiter, he said carefully. In approximately 2 minutes we're going to lose field containment. When that happens, 7 versions of reality are going to collapse back into one. The exotic matter release will be significant enough to sterilize this star system? Probably. The admission hung in space between them like a small sun. Captain Korath was gambling with the lives of billions of beings across multiple worlds, and everyone in the conversation knew it. Most interesting, Kilmoth projected. You would rather destroy everything than submit to guidance. High Arbiter, Captain Korath said quietly. Humanity has never responded well to threats. We found it's better to establish mutual respect from the beginning. The patterns that represented Kilmoth's consciousness shifted through configurations that had no human equivalent. For a moment that stretched across subjective eternities, the ancient intelligence considered the young species that had somehow weaponized theoretical physics and pointed it at the foundation of galactic civilization. "Very well," he projected finally. "The Confederation offers humanity full membership status, with all rights and responsibilities pertaining thereto. Your independence is recognized, your territory acknowledged, and your technological development will proceed without guidance." Captain Korath felt something that might have been relief, tempered by the knowledge that humanity had just irrevocably changed its relationship with the galaxy, and the fleet currently observing our demonstration will withdraw immediately and report that humanity has been reclassified as a peer civilization rather than a primitive species requiring guidance. The Morrison field fluctuated again, more severely this time. Reality was becoming increasingly negotiable around the 7 human ships. Chief Rodriguez, Captain Korath, called out, "Prepare for field collapse. All hands brace for dimensional reintegration." But as he gave the order, Captain Korath realized something had fundamentally changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy. They had forced recognition through demonstration of mutual assured destruction, but recognition nonetheless. The question now was what they would do with it. "Field collapse in 30 seconds, Chief Rodriguez announced. Captain Korath looked at the tactical display one last time, seeing 7 versions of the same human ship preparing to become one again. Around them, the Veltaran fleet waited at respectful distance, their weapons powered down in acknowledgement of new realities. "All stations," he announced across ship's communications, "prepare for normal space transition, and The Morrison field collapsed. Reality reasserted itself, and in the space where 7 ships had been, one remained, scarred, radiation burned, but intact. The UES Defiance hung alone among the stars, no longer the last desperate gamble of a primitive species, but the first warship of humanity's new era. The age of easy assumptions was indeed ending, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the incident that Confederation historians would later categorize as the quantum demonstration, Captain Korath stood on the observation deck of humanity's first deep space station, watching ships from a dozen species dock at newly constructed berths. The transformation had been remarkable and unsettling in equal measure. Where once human space had been an ignored backwater at the galaxy's edge, it had become a focal point of diplomatic and scientific interest. Species that had previously dismissed humanity as primitive mammals now sent their finest researchers to study the principles behind the Morrison field. None had successfully replicated it. Captain Dr. Jennifer Walsh approached from behind, her footsteps echoing in the observation lounge's vast space. As humanity's lead physicist for exotic matter research, she had become one of the most sought-after minds in the galaxy. "The Veltaran science delegation is requesting another meeting." Captain Korath nodded without surprise. Admiral Zuthera had personally led 3 separate expeditions to human space, each time bringing more advanced scanning equipment and more elaborate theories about humanity's impossible achievement. Each time she left with more questions than answers. What did they want to know this time? "Same thing as always." Dr. Walsh smiled grimly. "How we managed stable exotic matter containment without destroying ourselves in the process." The question haunted more than just the Veltarans. In the months since the quantum demonstration, 17 separate species had attempted to replicate human exotic matter manipulation. 3 had destroyed their research facilities. 2 had rendered entire star systems uninhabitable. The remainder had concluded that human technology operated on principles that were mathematically impossible, which was, Captain Korath reflected, entirely accurate. "Doctor," he said carefully, "have we considered the possibility that we shouldn't share everything we learned?" Dr. Walsh was quiet for a long moment, watching a massive hegemony research vessel maneuver into docking position with movements that defied conventional physics. Its crystalline hull shimmered with fields that bent light around impossible geometries. The technology that created the Morrison field killed 17 researchers. David, 17 of our best minds, people who knew the risks and accepted them anyway. She turned to face him, her expression carrying the weight of difficult choices. "The question isn't whether we should share it. The question is whether anyone else is desperate enough to pay the price." Through the observation lounge's transparent aluminum walls, the first human deep space installation continued its improbable existence. Built using principles derived from the Morrison field research, the station maintained structural integrity through controlled manipulation of local space-time. It was beautiful, functional, and completely insane by the engineering standards of every other known species. It was also impregnable. "Sir," communications specialist Torres approached from the station's command center, her expression tense. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. The Confederation Council has reached a decision regarding humanity's special status." Captain Korath felt a familiar tightness in his chest. For 6 months, the galaxy's governing body had debated what to do with a species that had achieved peer status through demonstration of mutually assured destruction. The easy solutions, guidance, subjugation, quarantine were no longer options. Put it through to the conference room. High Arbiter Killamoth's crystallized consciousness manifested in the station's main holographic projector, his ancient intelligence adapting to human communication protocols with the patience of geological time. Around the conference table, humanity's leadership, Admiral Harrison, Dr. Walsh, Captain Korath and Minister Patricia Chen from the Colonial Administration, prepared to learn their species' fate. The Confederation Council has concluded its deliberations. Killamoth projected, his thoughts carrying harmonics of decision reached through millennia of debate. Humanity will be granted full membership with unprecedented conditions. Admiral Harrison leaned forward. "What kind of conditions?" "You will be designated as a Class X civilization, the first such classification in Confederation history. This grants you absolute territorial sovereignty, unrestricted technological development, and exemption from standard intervention protocols." The humans exchanged glances. In galactic terms, they had just been granted permission to be as dangerous as they wanted, provided they stayed within their designated space. "In the catch?" Captain Korath asked. "No other species will be permitted access to humanity's exotic matter research. Your technological principles will be classified as existentially hazardous and restricted to human space only." Dr. Walsh spoke up. "You're quarantining our technology. We are acknowledging that some innovations require a specific mindset to implement safely," Killamoth corrected. "Humanity appears to possess a unique willingness to risk extinction for the sake of advancement. Most species consider this pathological. The Council considers it useful." "Useful how?" Admiral Harrison's voice carried the weariness of someone who had spent decades navigating galactic politics. Killamoth's patterns shifted into configurations that conveyed complex meaning. "In 47 civilizations worth of recorded history, we have encountered 17 existential threats to galactic stability: hostile extra-dimensional entities, rogue artificial intelligences, stellar engineers attempting to harvest galactic core energy, threats that required responses beyond conventional military capability." The implications settled over the human leadership like a cold wind. They were being positioned as the Confederation's weapon of last resort, the species crazy enough to risk everything when conventional solutions failed. "So we're to be the galaxy's attack dogs?" Minister Chen asked, her diplomatic training evident in the careful neutrality of her tone. "You are to be yourselves," Killamoth replied. "Should circumstances arise that require unconventional solutions, humanity's unique approach to problem-solving may prove valuable." Captain Korath understood. Humanity was being granted independence not despite their dangerous innovations, but because of them. They were too useful to destroy and too dangerous to control, so they would be allied instead. "What about our expansion rights?" Admiral Harrison asked. "Will we be restricted to Sol system?" "Humanity is granted colonization rights to any star system not already claimed by Confederation members. Additionally, should you encounter threats beyond Confederation space, you are authorized to respond according to your specialized capabilities." Dr. Walsh laughed, though there was little humor in it. "You're giving us permission to fight the monsters in the dark. The galaxy is larger than the Confederation," Killamoth acknowledged, "and not everything in that larger galaxy operates according to civilized principles. Occasionally, one must fight monsters with monsters." 3 hours after the Council's decision was transmitted across human space, Admiral Zoethara stood in her personal quarters aboard the research vessel Velthon, staring at intelligence reports that made her question fundamental assumptions about warfare. The human space station continued its impossible existence, maintained through technological principles that her species' finest scientists couldn't replicate. But more disturbing were the secondary intelligence reports. Rumors of human research projects that pushed exotic matter manipulation even further beyond acceptable limits. There were whispers of ships that could exist in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. Reports of weapons that collapsed local spacetime to create artificial black holes. Theoretical papers discussing the weaponization of quantum uncertainty itself. And through it all, the humans continued their research with the casual indifference of a species that had evolved on a world where extinction was always one mistake away. Her personal communicator chimed, indicating a priority message from Velteran High Command. Admiral Zygar accepted the transmission, unsurprised to see the scarred features of Fleet Admiral Kovacs, her direct superior and the architect of Velteran military doctrine. Zydara. His voice carried the weight of strategic recalculation. Your final assessment of human military capability. Unknown upper limits, she replied without hesitation. Their willingness to risk catastrophic failure gives them access to technologies that conventional military doctrine considers impossible. They've essentially weaponized insanity. And your recommendation? Admiral Zythertura considered the question with the thoroughness that had made her one of the Empire's finest strategic minds. The humans had demonstrated technology that violated conservation laws, shown a willingness to risk galactic-scale destruction, and been rewarded with independence and membership in the Confederation. Alliance, she said finally. Immediate and comprehensive. If we're going to share a galaxy with humans, it's better to have them as allies than enemies. Fleet Admiral Korvax's mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement. They've impressed you that much? Sir, Admiral Zarvader replied. They built weapons that shouldn't exist, used them against a superior fleet, and forced the entire Confederation to acknowledge their sovereignty. Yes, they've impressed me. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Zythahara alone with intelligence reports, and the growing realization that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The age of easy assumptions was indeed over, replaced by something more complex and infinitely more dangerous. But also, perhaps, more interesting. Captain Korath walked the corridors of the UES Defiance 6 months after the ship had ceased to exist in 7 different probability states simultaneously. The exotic matter scarring along the hull had been repaired, but the ship itself had been forever changed by its brief existence as a quantum impossibility, much like humanity itself. Captain, Chief Rodriguez appeared from engineering, his expression carrying the satisfaction of someone who had successfully maintained technology that violated several laws of physics. The new Morrison field generators are installed and tested. We're ready for our next assignment. Their next assignment. The phrase carried implications that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Humanity's first deep space exploration mission as a full Confederation member, tasked with investigating reports of unusual activity in the void regions beyond mapped space, and the exotic matter containment. Stable as we can make it, Rodriguez grinned. Which is to say, it'll probably kill us all if we look at it wrong, but it should hold together long enough to get the job done. Captain Korath nodded. That casual acceptance of catastrophic risk had become humanity's trademark in galactic society. Other species used fail-safes and redundant safety systems. Humans used controlled instability, and the knowledge that sometimes the most dangerous path was the only path forward. Sir, Communications Officer Blake called from the bridge, we're receiving departure clearance from Station Command. The Void Expedition is authorized to proceed. Captain Korath took his position in the command chair, looking around at the crew that had helped humanity transition from galactic afterthought to acknowledged peer civilization. They had achieved the impossible through willingness to risk everything, and now they were being asked to do it again. Chief Rodriguez, bring the Morrison field generators online. Generators charging, Captain. Field coherence nominal. Navigation. Plot course for the void regions. Best speed. Course laid in, sir. Captain Korath settled back in his chair, watching stars wheel past the main viewport as the UES Defiance prepared to enter hyperspace. Behind them, human space continued its remarkable expansion, powered by technologies that shouldn't exist and maintained through principles that most species considered pathological. Ahead lay the unknown, the unexplored, and quite possibly the dangerous. Engage, the UES Defiance disappeared into hyperspace, carrying humanity toward whatever waited in the darkness between stars. The ship's Morrison field generators hummed with barely contained exotic matter reactions, reality bending around impossible physics, as the crew prepared to face challenges that conventional military doctrine couldn't address. They were no longer the primitive species that had rejected Confederation guidance 3 years ago. They were humanity, the galaxy's weapon of last resort, its specialist in impossible solutions, its answer to problems that couldn't be solved through conventional means. And they were exactly where they belonged, in the depths of space where the only choice was evolution or extinction. Humanity had chosen evolution. The galaxy was about to learn what that meant. High Arbiter Killmoth existed in dimensions beyond normal spacetime, his consciousness processing information streams that flowed through crystallized thought matrices older than most stars. In the depths of the Nexus Council chamber, he contemplated the most recent reports from humanity's Void expedition. They had found something. The initial reports were classified at levels that required unanimous Council approval to access, but the implications were clear enough. In the darkness beyond Confederation space, humanity had encountered something that required their specialized approach to problem-solving. Something that had been watching the galaxy for longer than recorded history. Something that was no longer content to simply watch. Fascinating, Killmoth projected to himself, processing tactical data that suggested the next phase of galactic history would be even more interesting than the last. The humans had forced recognition through demonstration of mutually assured destruction. Now they would earn respect through demonstration of something far more valuable, the ability to fight monsters that conventional civilization couldn't even comprehend. In the void between stars, humanity was about to discover what they had really been preparing for, and the galaxy would learn why some species needed to be dangerous.